It started, as most nightmares do, with something entirely mundane. I needed money. The rent was climbing, my job wasn't cutting it, and the spare room in my apartment sat empty, gathering dust. It seemed like a simple solution, a practical decision to ease the financial strain. I posted an ad online, a generic listing for a room for rent. I never imagined it would lead to this, to the chilling realization that some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed again. This isn't just a story about a bad roommate. It's about an insidious invasion, a slow-motion horror that still haunts my every waking moment. Mara was the first to respond, and frankly, she seemed perfect. Quiet, polite, with an almost ethereal stillness about her. She spoke softly, answered all my questions, and had a steady job. She paid the first month's rent and deposit on the spot in crisp, new bills. She moved in with minimal fuss, just a few boxes and a small suitcase. No loud music, no late-night parties, no endless stream of visitors. She was the ideal roommate, a phantom presence who seemed to exist solely within the confines of her own room. I barely heard a peep from her. I remember thinking how lucky I was. She was respectful, self-contained, and always paid on time. Sometimes we'd share a bottle of wine in the living room, watching Netflix in comfortable silence. I assumed she was just a bit lonely, perhaps a little shy. I couldn't have been more wrong. The normalcy, that comforting veneer of a perfectly ordinary living situation, began to crack slowly. It wasn't a sudden, dramatic shift, but a creeping unease, a series of small, almost imperceptible intrusions that chipped away at my sense of security. The tension built like a pressure cooker, one tiny detail at a time. It started with my toothbrush. I'd leave it in the holder, perfectly dry after brushing my teeth. But then, I'd pick it up later, and the bristles would be damp, as if it had just been used. I dismissed it as my imagination, a trick of the light, or perhaps I hadn't dried it properly. Then came the drawers. My dresser drawers, specifically. I'm meticulous about my clothes, always folding them a certain way. I'd open a drawer and find my shirts rearranged, not drastically, but subtly different, as if someone had been sifting through them. I told myself I was just being paranoid, that I must have forgotten how I'd left them. The bed was another one. I'm not the neatest person, I'll admit. My bed is usually a bit rumpled when I leave for work. But I'd come home, and it would be perfectly made, the sheets tucked in with military precision, the pillows fluffed. It was always better than I could ever make it myself. A part of me was grateful, but a larger part felt a cold knot of dread tightening in my stomach. These were small things, easily dismissed individually, but together they formed a pattern, a whisper of something deeply unsettling. My apartment, my sanctuary, no longer felt entirely my own. It felt observed. Every time I noticed one of these anomalies, a shiver would run down my spine. I started to feel like I was living in a glass house, constantly on display. The feeling grew, a persistent itch under my skin. I found myself checking locks more often, glancing over my shoulder in my own hallway. The quiet presence of Mara, once a comfort, now felt like a suffocating weight. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was profoundly wrong, something far more disturbing than a simple case of a nosy roommate. The unease escalated into outright terror one Tuesday morning. I woke up to a faint, desperate scratching sound. It was coming from the closet in the living room, the one I rarely used. My cat, Mittens, was usually curled up on my bed, but she wasn't there. The scratching grew more frantic, accompanied by a muffled meow. My heart hammered against my ribs as I rushed to the closet door. It was latched from the outside. I fumbled with the hook, my fingers trembling, and pulled the door open. Mittens stumbled out, gasping for air, her eyes wide with fear. She was disoriented, her fur matted with sweat. She had been locked in there in the dark with no ventilation for hours. A cold, hard certainty settled over me. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. And there was only one other person in the apartment. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Mara. She had locked my cat in the closet. The quiet, unassuming roommate was capable of something truly cruel. I knew, in that moment, that I couldn't live with her anymore. But I also knew I couldn't confront her directly. The thought of her calm, unblinking gaze filled me with a primal fear. I needed to protect myself, to create a barrier between us. The first thing I did was change the locks, all of them, all. I called a locksmith that afternoon, inventing a story about a faulty mechanism. When Mara asked about it later, her voice as soft as ever, I simply told her it was a maintenance issue, a necessary upgrade. She nodded, her expression unreadable. That night, I heard it. A low, guttural sound like a wounded animal, coming from her room. It was crying, I realized, a choked, desperate sound. And then, whispering. Indistinct, but undeniably there, through the thin walls separating our rooms. It was a sound that burrowed deep into my mind, a chilling prelude to the horror yet to come. The crying and whispering continued for a few nights, a haunting lullaby that kept me awake, my nerves frayed. I felt like a prisoner in my own home, constantly on edge. I knew I had to get her out, but I needed a reason, something concrete. I couldn't just say, "You locked my cat in the closet," not without proof, not without risking her unpredictable reaction. I started searching. Not overtly, not like a detective, but subtly, when she was out. I checked under her bed, in her drawers, in her closet. Nothing. She kept her room meticulously tidy, almost sterile. It was frustrating, maddening. I was looking for anything, a clue, a sign, something to confirm my growing dread. Then, one afternoon, while she was at work, I was dusting the bookcase in the living room, the one that stood against the wall shared with her bedroom. My hand brushed against a loose panel at the back near the bottom. It wasn't obvious, just a slight give. My heart leaped into my throat. I pushed harder, and a small section of the panel slid inward, revealing a dark cavity. Inside, tucked away, was a small leather-bound journal. It looked old, worn, its pages filled with cramped, looping handwriting. My hands trembled as I pulled it out. This was it. This was what I had been searching for. I carried it to my room, locked the door, and sat on my bed, the journal heavy in my lap. I opened it, my breath catching in my throat. The first page was dated weeks before Mara had even moved in. My name was scrawled across the top. And then, the words began. Pages and pages of them, all about me. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just a journal. It was a chronicle of my life, meticulously documented, terrifyingly detailed. The journal was a descent into madness. It wasn't just about me. It was me, seen through Mara's twisted lens. Every page was a fresh stab of terror. She had documented my daily life with an obsessive precision that made my stomach churn. It was a horrifying inventory of my existence. She wrote about what I wore each day, describing my outfits down to the smallest detail. Tuesday, the faded blue jeans, the gray sweater with the small tear near the cuff. She knew what I ate for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner. Wednesday, oatmeal with berries, then a tuna sandwich, later pasta with red sauce. She even noted when I cried. Thursday night, soft sobs from her room lasted 20 minutes. But it got worse. Much, much worse. Tucked between the pages were crude yet disturbingly accurate. Drawings of me sleeping, my face slack, my hair splayed on the pillow. How could she have drawn these? How could she have seen me like that? The answer was a chilling whisper in my mind. She was in my room, while I slept. And then, the transcriptions. Verbatim accounts of my sleep talk. Fragments of dreams, mumbled words, incoherent sentences. She had written them all down, every single one. She said, "No, don't touch that," in her sleep tonight. What was she dreaming of? The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Mara was never sleeping. She was always listening, always watching. She wasn't just a quiet roommate. She was a predator, meticulously studying her prey. The journal wasn't just a record. It was a blueprint, a plan. She wasn't just living in my apartment. She was living my life, from the shadows, absorbing every detail, every breath. The thought made me want to scream. The journal revealed a terrifying truth. Mara didn't want a room. She wanted a life. My life. She wanted to inhabit it, to consume it, to become me. The subtle intrusions, the rearranged drawers, the perfectly made bed, the wet toothbrush. They weren't just signs of a nosy roommate. They were acts of possession, of infiltration. She was trying to erase my presence and replace it with her own. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. The journal lay open beside me, its contents burned into my mind. The sun finally rose, casting a pale, anemic light into my room. I knew what I had to do. There was no other option. I waited until I heard Mara stirring in her room. Then, I walked out into the living room, the journal clutched in my hand. She emerged, her face placid, her eyes unreadable. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't scream. I simply held up the journal. "You need to leave," I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "Now." Her eyes flickered to the journal, then back to my face. There was no surprise, no anger, no fear, just a quiet acceptance. She didn't argue. She didn't ask why. She simply nodded. She went back into her room, and I heard the rustle of her packing. It took her less than an hour. She emerged with her few boxes and the small suitcase she had arrived with. She walked past me, her gaze unwavering, and then she was gone. The door clicked shut behind her, leaving an echoing silence in the apartment. I stood there for a long time, listening to the quiet, waiting for the relief to wash over me. But it never came. Only a profound, unsettling emptiness. I changed the locks again, scrubbed the apartment from top to bottom, trying to erase every trace of her. I even considered moving, but the thought of her finding me again, of starting this nightmare over, was too much to bear. I tried to convince myself it was over, that she was gone, that I was safe. But Mara, it turned out, was not so easily evicted. Her presence lingered, a chilling shadow that refused to dissipate. It started a week after she left. I woke up, and there it was, tucked neatly under my pillow, a single, folded piece of paper. My heart leaped into my throat. I unfolded it with trembling fingers. The handwriting was familiar, the same cramped, looping script from the journal. The message was short, just 5 words. "I miss living inside your life." Every week since then, it's been the same. A new note, always under my pillow, always with the same message. Sometimes the paper is different. Sometimes the ink is a slightly different shade. But the words are always identical. I miss living inside your life. It's a constant reminder, a chilling whisper in the dark. She's still out there. She's still watching. She's still obsessed. The notes are a testament to the insidious nature of her fixation, a terrifying declaration that she hasn't given up. She wants to consume me, to become me, to live my life. I don't know where she is. I don't know how she gets in. But every time I find a note, I feel her presence, cold and suffocating. The apartment, once my sanctuary, is now a cage. I am constantly looking over my shoulder, jumping at every shadow, every creak of the floorboards. The horror isn't just what she did, but what she represents. The terrifying possibility that someone can want to completely consume another's existence, to erase their identity and replace it with their own. It's a dread that settles deep in my bones, a constant gnawing fear. I am no longer just living my life. I am living a life under siege. And I know, with a chilling certainty, that Mara is still out there, waiting. Waiting for her chance to move back in. Waiting to live inside my life once more. Elena Torres lived a life of quiet routine, a rhythm dictated by the gentle hum of her laptop and the call of the wild. At 26, she was a freelance graphic designer, her days spent crafting digital worlds from her cozy apartment in Portland, Oregon. Her existence was one of deliberate calm, a stark contrast to the chaos that would soon engulf her. Weekends were her escape, her sanctuary found not in city lights, but in the embrace of ancient trees. She was an avid hiker, drawn to the raw beauty of the Pacific Northwest. The trails of Mount Hood National Forest were her second home, a familiar tapestry of earth and sky she knew intimately. This particular Saturday promised the usual solace. The air was crisp, the scent of pine needles sharp and invigorating. Elena set out with a light heart, anticipating the familiar crunch of leaves beneath her boots, the rhythmic cadence of her own breath. She chose a trail she had walked countless times, a path as ingrained in her memory as the lines on her own palm. There was no premonition, no shiver down her spine to warn her of the impending darkness. Just the quiet confidence of a woman at peace with her surroundings, utterly unaware that her familiar world was about to shatter. The forest, usually a source of comfort, held a secret, a malevolent presence lurking just beyond her sight. The familiar trail, a ribbon of earth she trusted implicitly, suddenly betrayed her. One moment, Elena was lost in the quiet contemplation of the towering firs. The next, the ground beneath her vanished. It wasn't a stumble, not a misstep, but a deliberate, calculated void. A hidden mechanism, expertly concealed, had been triggered. Her foot plunged into an unseen depression, and then a sudden, violent jerk. A makeshift snare, crafted with chilling precision, tightened around her ankle. It was a trap designed not to hold, but to incapacitate. The force of the impact was brutal, sending a shockwave through her body. Her head struck something hard and unyielding. The world spun, a kaleidoscope of green and brown blurring into an indistinct haze. Then, the all-consuming darkness. Consciousness slipped away, a silent surrender to the forest floor. The familiar sounds of the wilderness faded, replaced by an ominous silence. She lay there, a solitary figure ensnared, utterly vulnerable. A pawn in a game she didn't even know had begun. He was known only as Clyde, a man in his 50s, his face etched with the deep lines of reclusion and a profound, unsettling solitude. For years, he had existed on the fringes, a ghost in the wilderness, his mind a labyrinth of fractured thoughts and escalating paranoia. Clyde was a man consumed by mental illness, his grip on reality tenuous at best. He lived off-grid, his existence a testament to his desperate need for isolation. His cabin, a crude structure of salvaged wood and tarps, was a masterwork of camouflage, blending seamlessly into the dense forest. It was a fortress built not against the elements, but against a world he believed had gone irrevocably wrong. For months, Clyde had been watching. He observed the hikers, their carefree laughter and confident strides from the shadows. They were, in his twisted perception, the last vestiges of a dying world, oblivious to the cataclysm he believed had already occurred. His delusion was absolute. Civilization had collapsed, reduced to rubble and moral decay. He saw himself as the chosen one, the sole survivor tasked with a monumental undertaking. He believed it was his sacred duty to rebuild society, to forge a new world from the ashes of the old. And to do that, he needed help. He needed a partner, someone pure and untainted by the perceived corruption of the outside world. He needed a woman. Elena awoke to an oppressive, suffocating darkness. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and something else, something metallic and stale. Her head throbbed, a relentless drumbeat against her skull. She tried to move, but her wrists and ankles were bound, chafing against rough rope. She was on a cot, its springs groaning beneath her weight. There were no windows, no sliver of light to pierce the gloom. Then, a voice, low and gravelly, broke the silence. It was Clyde. He spoke of a new beginning, of a world reborn, of her being chosen to help him. His words were a chilling tapestry of delusion and conviction. He saw her not as a victim, but as a vital component in his deranged vision. Elena, despite the terror that clawed at her throat, recognized the profound danger. This was not a simple abduction. This was a descent into a madman's reality. Panic was a luxury she could not afford. Her survival depended on a single, desperate strategy: cooperation. She maintained a facade of calm, nodding, offering placid responses, feigning belief in his twisted narrative. Every moment was a calculated observation. She watched Clyde's routine, the precise way he moved, the times he left the cabin, the specific tools he used. She noted the worn leather belt where he kept his keys, the way he always hung them on a nail by the door when he went outside. Her mind, sharp and analytical, cataloged every detail, every potential weakness in his meticulously constructed prison. This calculated strategy was her only hope. It was a silent battle of wits, a desperate gamble for freedom. Each passing day was an agonizing eternity, a test of her resolve. 23 days she endured. 23 days she played the part, all while her spirit screamed for escape. The forest, usually a silent observer, roared to life. A torrential rainstorm descended upon the cabin, a furious deluge that hammered against the roof and walls. The wind howled, a mournful lament that seemed to echo Elena's own despair. But amidst the chaos, a flicker of hope ignited. The storm, relentless and unforgiving, exposed a weakness in Clyde's crude sanctuary. A leak, a steady drip that quickly became a torrent, began to flood a corner of the cabin. Clyde, distracted and agitated, moved quickly to address the problem. His focus narrowed, consumed by the immediate threat to his fragile domain. In his haste, in his preoccupation with the rising water, he made a critical error. He stepped out briefly to secure a tarp, leaving the heavy wooden door ajar. The sound of the storm, the urgency of the moment, had made him careless. The latch, usually secured with a heavy bolt, was left unlocked. It was a fleeting moment, a window of opportunity that might never present itself again. The storm, a force of nature that had seemed to conspire against her, had now, in its fury, offered a desperate chance. Elena's heart pounded, a frantic drum against her ribs. This was it. The moment Clyde's back was turned, Elena moved. Her fingers, raw and calloused from days of subtle manipulation, worked with frantic precision. She had cleverly hidden a small, sharp nail, a discarded piece of metal she had found weeks ago. Now, it was her key to freedom. With agonizing slowness, she picked at the knots binding her wrists, the rough fibers giving way under the relentless pressure. Once her hands were free, the rest was swift. She untied her ankles, her muscles screaming in protest as blood rushed back into her limbs. The cabin door, left ajar, beckoned like a beacon. She slipped out, a shadow merging with the deeper shadows of the storm-lashed forest. Barefoot and disoriented, she plunged into the dense undergrowth. The rain was a cold, stinging assault, the ground slick with mud and decaying leaves. Branches lashed at her face, thorns tore at her skin, but she pushed on, driven by a primal need for survival. Every rustle, every snap of a twig, sent a jolt of terror through her. She had no compass, no sense of direction in the overwhelming darkness. But then, a faint murmur reached her ears, a steady rhythmic sound that cut through the roar of the storm. It was the sound of a nearby stream, a lifeline in the vast, unforgiving wilderness. She stumbled towards it, letting the sound guide her, knowing that water always flowed downhill, towards civilization. The first slivers of dawn painted the sky in bruised purples and grays as Elena stumbled out of the tree line. Her body was a symphony of aches and pains, her feet raw and bleeding, but her spirit, against all odds, remained unbroken. Through the mist, she saw it, the faint glow of a campfire. She collapsed, half crawling, half stumbling towards the light. A group of campers, startled by her sudden appearance, rushed to her side. Her story, fragmented and hoarse, was met with immediate action. Without hesitation, they contacted the authorities, their voices urgent, their faces etched with concern. The response was swift and decisive. Within hours, a search and rescue team, guided by Elena's harrowing account, descended upon the coordinates she provided. They raided the camouflaged cabin, a place of unspeakable horrors hidden in plain sight. Clyde, caught off guard, was apprehended without resistance, his reign of terror brought to an abrupt end. The discovery of his hidden lair was a chilling testament to his depravity. The cabin was a shrine to his delusions, filled with crude tools and disturbing artifacts. More disturbingly, the surrounding forest revealed a network of meticulously placed traps, silent sentinels of his twisted domain. Elena's ordeal was not an isolated incident. It was a glimpse into a meticulously planned nightmare. Elena's harrowing ordeal, a nightmare etched into the very fabric of her being, became a catalyst for profound change. Her story, once whispered in hushed tones, resonated far beyond the quiet trails of Mount Hood. It led to significant improvements in trail safety protocols across the region. Authorities, now acutely aware of the hidden dangers, launched extensive sweeps, systematically removing other dangerous devices and traps from public lands. The physical wounds healed, but the psychological scars ran deep. Elena suffered from severe post-traumatic stress disorder, the echoes of her captivity haunting her waking hours and invading her dreams. Yet, she refused to be defined by her trauma. Instead, she channeled her pain, her fear, and her newfound resilience into a powerful force for good. She became a passionate advocate for women's outdoor safety, her voice clear and unwavering. She spoke at conferences, led workshops, and shared her story with anyone who would listen, empowering others with knowledge and awareness. She championed the importance of survival training, equipping individuals with the skills to navigate not just the wilderness, but unexpected dangers. Elena Torres transformed her personal tragedy into a beacon of hope. Her journey from victim to survivor, from silence to advocacy, became an inspiring testament to the human spirit's capacity for resilience. She proved that even in the darkest of shadows, one can find the strength to illuminate a path towards a safer, more prepared future. There are stories that begin with a whisper, a fleeting shadow, or a sense of unease that settles deep within the bones. This is one such story, a descent into the unsettling depths of obsession and the chilling paranoia it can breed. It is a narrative told from the inside, from the very heart of a mind slowly unraveling. My world, once so predictable, became a stage for an unseen drama. It was a psychological thriller unfolding in the quiet corners of my daily life, a creeping dread that started with a simple glance. The lines between observer and observed, between sanity and madness, would soon blur beyond recognition. My life was a tapestry woven from routine, a comforting monotony that defined my existence. Every morning, precisely at 8:17 a.m., I would board the Red Line train, settling into the same seat. My coffee, still steaming, was a familiar warmth in my hand. This daily commute was a sacred ritual, a quiet prelude to the day ahead. It was a time for reflection, for the world to pass by in a blur of motion and sound. I was an ordinary commuter, indistinguishable from the thousands of others who shared the tracks. Then, one morning, the rhythm of my world shifted. A new presence entered my carefully constructed routine, subtly altering its very fabric. My commute, once a predictable journey, would never be the same again. She first appeared on the train like a phantom, materializing without fanfare. Her presence was quiet, almost imperceptible, yet it registered somewhere deep within my subconscious. She boarded consistently at the Cedar Avenue stop, a new fixture in my morning landscape. She was always dressed in blue, a muted shade that seemed to absorb the light around her. Her hair, a cascade of dark waves, was invariably gathered in a loose braid, resting gently on her shoulder. These details, at first, were merely observations. What truly set her apart was the book she held. Without fail, she was engrossed in Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, its worn cover a testament to countless readings. She never looked up, never acknowledged anyone, a self-contained universe within the bustling carriage. My initial observations were casual, a fleeting curiosity in the periphery of my awareness. But gradually, imperceptibly at first, that curiosity began to deepen. It transformed into something more potent, a consuming fixation that started to dominate my thoughts. I found myself anticipating her presence each morning, a subtle shift in my internal clock. The train journey, once a means to an end, became a prelude to her arrival. Her absence, even for a single day, would leave a hollow ache. Soon, I began to change my seat, subtly positioning myself for a better view. I wanted to see the way her brow furrowed in concentration, the slight curve of her lips as she read. I wanted to understand the world she inhabited within the pages of her book. Then, a deliberate act. I bought my own copy of Rebecca. I imagined it as a silent invitation, a shared secret, a potential conversation starter. I would hold it openly, hoping she might notice, hoping for a flicker of recognition. I noticed everything about her, from the way she turned a page to the faint scent of lavender that seemed to cling to her. Yet, despite my intense scrutiny, I remained utterly unnoticed. I was a ghost in her periphery, a silent observer in her world. My actions escalated from mere anticipation to a series of deliberate attempts to bridge the gap between us. The purchase of Rebecca was not just a whim. It was a calculated move, a desperate desire to break through her serene facade. I wanted to be seen, to be acknowledged. I would hold the book conspicuously, sometimes even mouthing words from its pages, hoping to catch her eye. I imagined a shared smile, a knowing glance, a moment of connection. But she remained an enigma, her gaze fixed on the printed word. She never once acknowledged my presence, not with a glance, not with a nod, not even a subtle shift in her posture. It was as if I were invisible, a part of the train's background hum. This lack of reciprocation only fueled my growing obsession. turning it into a silent, burning need. Then, one morning, she was gone. The Cedar Avenue stop came and went, and her seat remained empty. A cold dread settled in my stomach, a profound sense of loss that felt disproportionate to our non-existent relationship. Days turned into a week. Each morning commute a hollow echo of what it had become. The train felt emptier, the journey longer, the coffee colder. Her absence was a gaping void in my carefully constructed routine, a disruption that left me feeling adrift. Just as I began to despair, she reappeared. One ordinary morning, there she was, boarding at Cedar Avenue, dressed in blue, Rebecca in hand. A wave of relief, so potent it almost buckled my knees, washed over me. But something was different. Her usual composure was shattered. Her shoulders were hunched, and her head was bowed, her hair obscuring her face. A quiet, almost imperceptible sound reached me across the aisle. She was crying. My heart pounded, a frantic drum against my ribs. This was it, the moment. I could offer comfort, a tissue, a word. But I froze, paralyzed by a strange mix of fear and a perverse sense of triumph. I watched, unable to move as her silent tears fell. The next morning, the train felt different. A subtle shift in the air, a prickle on my skin. I settled into my usual seat, the one I had chosen for its optimal view of her. My hand brushed against something taped beneath the seat cushion. My fingers fumbled, pulling at the edge of a small rectangular object. It was a photograph, creased and slightly worn. My breath hitched in my throat as I recognized the image. It was me. The photograph depicted me on the train, my head slightly turned, my gaze fixed on something just out of frame. My coffee cup was in my hand, the morning light catching the steam. It was a candid shot, taken without my knowledge. A cold wave of realization washed over me, chilling me to the bone. The angle of the shot, the perspective, it was all wrong. It wasn't taken from the platform or from a passing window. It was taken from across the aisle. My eyes darted to her seat, now empty. The implications crashed down on me with the force of a physical blow. Then I saw it. Scrawled on the back of the photograph, in a precise, elegant hand, were 5 words that would forever haunt my waking hours. You sit here every day like you belong to me. The world tilted on its axis. The profound realization hit me with the force of a freight train. All this time, I had been the observer, the one fixated, the one watching. But I had been wrong. Terribly, terrifyingly wrong. She wasn't the one being watched. I was. The woman in blue, the quiet reader of Rebecca, had been observing me with an intensity that mirrored my own. Every subtle shift, every changed seat, every deliberate display of my book, she had seen it all. The lines between observer and observed had not just blurred, they had been utterly erased. My carefully constructed reality shattered, revealing a chilling truth. The obsession I thought was mine had been a reflection, a twisted mirror image. Sanity and madness, once distinct concepts, now danced a macabre waltz. The quiet woman on the train was not a stranger I had fixated upon. She was the architect of my unraveling, the silent puppeteer of my growing paranoia. And I, the unwitting subject, had walked right into her trap.